Well, there you have it. That was Trump's first address to the joint session of Congress. Technically his first State of the Union of the second term. Almost 2 hours. So I think we got started around 8:15. It is now 10 o'clock. Hour and 45-minute speech. It was long, and it was monotonous, and it was basically everything that we've already heard in every other speech. So, off to an exciting start with the representative from Texas, Al Green, heckling the president and then being removed from the sergeant at arms forcibly. Democrats heckled throughout. A lot of jeering, yelling, laughing. But Trump overcame. Some dynamic moments, some news. We're informed that the leader and conspirator who planned the attack against the soldiers in Afghanistan has been captured. We got the letter from Zelensky. Some other dynamic moments. Secret Service badge for the Mexican kid. Fat guy that got into West Point. Signed that bill about the animal sanctuary. Yeah. It's really what you can expect. So it was all the usual suspects talking about tariffs, talking about the border, Doge, tax cuts, law enforcement, the usual. A lot of it is literally borrowed from speeches from years ago. Lakin Riley, I know he signed the bill, but that we've been hearing about forever. The whole thing at the end, I'm so sick of the thing at the end where he does the, our ancestors came across and built the fucking railroads and went to the moon and like, how many fucking times are we gonna hear that canned, corny ass outro? This total half-ass amateur hour, like half-hearted little history deal. Who is that for? Like, you could tell that Trump tells the speechwriters, oh, I like that part. Throw some of that stuff in there at the end. I like that. Who is that for? Is that for, like, idiots? It's just so amateurish. He's not a good speaker. I mean, he was never great at scripted speeches. He was always a little more entertaining off the cuff. But these are just becoming unbearable. Every time he goes off the teleprompter, he gets lost. Used to be the case that he would go off the teleprompter and he'd actually deliver like a cogent sidebar that was relevant or funny. And there were some funny moments in this one. But these days he gets off the teleprompter and then just gets lost. He just starts repeating himself, saying the same, have you ever heard of it? Like no one's ever seen. And it, like I said during the speech, it's like it reminds you of an old relative. It reminds me of like my parents. Like my parents say a lot of the same stuff. You know, like your grandparents tell the same stories. It's like that. And it's just getting really hard to watch. So it was super long. The reading is just not great. Like he struggles to get through these speeches. I don't know if he has a hard time reading them or he doesn't practice them in advance, but I mean, some of these sentences, they're just not, there's no dynamic delivery. It's extremely monotone. And you could tell a lot of times he starts a sentence not knowing where it's going. So the delivery's awkward. And when you're doing that for an hour and 50 minutes, it's a little tough. It's a little tough to get through. And very dry, too. The material's very dry. And I understand what he was trying to do in the middle. He got into the Doge tax cuts, or the, I should say, the Doge spending cuts. And I think that was deliberate. He went through and listed about a dozen or 2 dozen different items that Doge was cutting. He went through and listed all the categories of super seniors, super centenarians who are allegedly receiving Social Security benefits, and people were rolling their eyes. All right, move on. The Democrats were jeering. That was the point. That was a rhetorical tool. I don't know how effective that was. I think it's just tedious. And I think it's interesting how much of the speech is dedicated now to these other issues. This is a different platform than what Trump ran on in 2016. In particular, very little discussion of immigration. It's not that it didn't come up at all. It did, but it was a minor part of the speech. And not only that, but the script on immigration has been flipped. We thought when Trump ran the first time that we were going to a place where we were going to remove all the immigrants, that we were going to ban all immigrants from coming here. We would have a moratorium or net zero. There would be large deportations. And now the immigration proposal is flipped where they say something like, we're getting the criminal illegals out and we're getting the good ones in. That's different. That's different than what it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we thought eventually we'd get to a place where you say, we've had enough, we're full, we don't want any more. On net, we want to be zero or negative on immigration. Now we're at a place where they're saying, we actually want people to come here, we want more immigration, and we're going to offset it when we remove these criminal illegals. Not even all illegals, but the ones that have committed crimes. So much of it is about tax and spend, which was never really a big part of the MAGA agenda. The MAGA agenda was more about tariffs. We wanted to protect entitlements, didn't really mind the deficits. Trump had very high deficits. Now it's all tax and spend. It's all about fighting those interest rates down. These tax cuts, they want to cut the tax on tips, corporate tax cut, 100% expensing, they want a tax credit for car loans. They want cut the tax on overtime, on Social Security. And the tax cuts, you can't have it all ways. You can't be a budget hawk and want a balanced budget. You can't cut all the waste and abuse. Also not touch entitlements. Also do huge tax cuts. Also do tariffs. Also get everybody out. You can't have it all. There's going to have to be choices. And that's why I'm concerned about how they're prioritizing these things. Because if you have to choose between all those items, and most of the initiative is behind austerity, and most of the initiative is behind tax cuts, then that's clearly the priority. And if we have to keep more immigrants here to keep the austerity, then they'll do that. Anyway, so that was the State of the Union. That was a marathon, nearly 2 hours. Very chaotic. There was no decorum this time. Like I said, it was notable that the Democrats were extremely rowdy. Started with basically civil disobedience from Al Green, the Democratic congressman from Texas. He refused to sit down. He refused to leave. Very awkward. I think it put Trump off his game initially. Trump, you could tell, was furious. Eventually, he was removed by the sergeant at arms, and he was kicked out. And it took a moment for Trump to get his mojo. But once that happened, it was on. And then Trump just kept coming back with the drive-by shots at the Democrats repeatedly throughout the night, hitting them, hitting Biden on inflation, on illegal immigrants, gloating about his victory over Kamala, that only he could fix these things. God saved him to make America great. And the Democrats were equally as disruptive. They were screaming, holding up their stupid little signs on their phones. Some of them were sleeping. Very disrespectful, very inappropriate. But you know what? You know, not for nothing, he sets the tone. You can't complain about a lack of decorum when you have no decorum. And I know it goes back 10 years. I mean, they've been prosecuting this guy. They've been getting this guy in a lot of trouble. But the way he's been running the Oval Office, the people that are being brought in, the sort of glibness, you sort of invite that. I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. And I'm not the biggest civility cuck. I understand to an extent that you want to gloat, and I understand to an extent you want to be frank and you want to speak plainly. But it is just a circus now. I mean, there's just no rules. There's no rules for Elon. There's no rules for Vance. No rules for Trump. No rules for the Democrats. It's just a total free-for-all. It's a total joke. Who could take our country seriously? How do you watch this and you see half the chamber is on their phones, sleeping, holding up stupid signs, screaming, "That's our president," screaming out and yelling. One of them had to be kicked out. I don't like it. Aside from that, the speech was in usual, and I'm not trying to hate. This is not me hating. This is just true. Trump is not a strong speaker. He never was. Trump was good at the rallies, and you could count on one hand how many speeches that were scripted he really delivered with heart, with gusto. But especially now, and it's been getting worse every year, these speeches just become brutal. And I don't know if it's just me. I'm telling you my reaction. Other people claim they're still loving this. I don't know if they're watching the same thing, but they're so monotonous and so boring. And it's all the same material. This is the same material from the inaugural. This is the same material from, that was a stump speech. There's no rhetoric in there. And like I said, that's the scripted part. The scripted part is monotonous. Then he goes off the script and gets lost. He goes off the script and he's kind of making it up as he goes along. He used to be able to do it better. It was funny. Now I don't know where he's going with a lot of this stuff. He kind of falls back on these weird verbal tics, these weird patterns. So it's a tough watch. And a lot of the phrasing is really awkward. Like I said, he'll start a sentence, not really know where it's going, and it doesn't really stick the landing. And they try to put some of these moments in there, and they always do that at these State of the Unions. They have the kid with cancer, the girl who got a volleyball smashed into her face by a guy. You got all the, wives of people that died and daughters of people that got shot in the head or whatever. And these are the touching, artful moments. To me, they just come across really as insincere. They come across as really insincere and canned and corny and in a cruel and sort of sick way, almost self-conscious of what it is. There's not even like a good kayfabe. There's not even a good pretense. So I really can't stand these speeches anymore. In terms of just the pure delivery, they're just hard to watch. They're just tough to watch, especially, and Vance sitting behind him is so ugly. This has got to be the ugliest vice president in American history. At least before, we didn't like her, but at least before we had Kamala, she looked good. And at least before you had Mike Pence, he looked like a total normie, but he looked okay. And Joe Biden is a handsome guy. This guy, oh my gosh, sitting there for 2 hours looking at this fat, ugly face. Look at him. And people are trying to portray this guy like he's some kind of Chad. People are trying to portray, oh, he's got a Chad beard. He's super masculine. Look at this fat, ugly, pouty baby face. He looks like a giant, fat adult baby with this pouty little face. Look at this pouty little mouth. Look at how the fat hangs from his face like that. Those weird sunken in eyes. It's just like offensive. Nobody wants to look at that. This like shadow on his neck from his neck beard. I hate it. I hate the way he looks. Trump's looking tired. Hair's looking thin. I'm not going to lie, guys. This was a tough watch. I'm just about at the end of it in terms of, I don't know how much I support any of this anymore. And you almost feel more sympathetic to the Republicans just because you see the Democrats. The Democrats are such a freak show. They're so insane. They're so ridiculous. You almost by default have to automatically be with the Republicans. And you're reminded when you see them, when you hear them, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm definitely with the right. But just on their own, for their own sake, it's getting rough. It's getting hard to watch. So, I don't know, guys. Is this the golden age? If that's a golden age, it's not exactly what I had in mind. My golden age would have a lot less talk about taxes and spending. It'd have a lot more talk about crime in the cities? Where's the talk about crime? There's like a crime wave going on. It's out of control. There's just nothing on that. There's supposed to be a mass deportation. There's almost nothing on that. I thought we were supposed to build the border wall. Wasn't even mentioned. Like, that's just for openers. When I think about the biggest problems in the country, I think about crime. I think about the border and the illegals that are coming here. The border's okay, but where's the wall? Where's the deportations? Crime wasn't even mentioned. At least, strictly speaking, the kind of crime in like Democrat cities, the carjackings, the property crimes, drive-by shootings, things like that. So that wasn't discussed. Nothing to be said about social media, nothing to be said about artificial intelligence, hardly. It's a lot of talk about things that the interests like. Getting interest rates down, cutting taxes, selling citizenship to rich people, critical minerals, rare earths, all this kind of stuff. So in a way, it's disappointing. When are we just going to get the goods? When are we just going to get the goods? When are we going to get the meat? We're getting all this other stuff. And you recognize, by the way, so much of what has been done in the first 45 days was done for this moment, literally. English isn't going to become the official language of America without a constitutional amendment or a law in Congress. He signed that executive order so he could say it during this address. It doesn't really matter that we pulled out of the WHO. We're probably going back. They just did it for this address. And so many of the other things are that way. It's for the headline. It's so they can run on it. It's literally to stack the resume for occasions like this. How much of it is really happening? How much of that is really what the base wants? How much of that is really changing anything for that matter? So I'm disappointed that we're 10 years in and there just doesn't seem to be too much development. And if anything, it's developing in the wrong direction. We started this journey 10 years ago, and it seemed like it was more sophisticated and more robust and more revolutionary at the start than at the beginning. At the start, I feel like there were more radical ideas, radical rhetoric. They were talking about globalism. The way they framed the dreamers, the DACA recipients, was to say our people have dreams as well. And there was talk about building physical infrastructure to prevent immigrants from coming here, not just scaring them away by being tough. And so it seemed almost like 10 years ago it was more hearty, better, more revolutionary, more sophisticated. Now it's been ground down, it's been sanded down by the interests to be this kind of like big globo corpo thing with a nice facade, with this pretense that it's for social conservatives or for immigration restrictionists. It's tax cuts, budget cuts, interest rate cuts, but also we signed an executive order on trannies, but also immigration is lower now. Yeah, that's kind of too little too late. 10 million people came in 4 years. Now people aren't going to come for 4 years. And they're going to start coming back in the next administration. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't love it. It doesn't excite me. And I think a lot of the people that are really into this stuff, I think a lot of them are just pretending. Honestly, the people that are really into this stuff, it's almost a form of self-delusion. It's a form of everybody's getting together and pretending it's better than it is. It's a form of collective delusion where everybody says, yep, this is just what I wanted. This is what I voted for. And it's like, yeah, I didn't vote because none of this stuff really interests me. We're budget hawks now? They're talking about balanced budget. We got to be deficit hawks. What? Like, since when? I know he talked a little bit about that in his first campaign, but that's like Paul Ryan's dream. That's like Eric Cantor's dream. Cutting the budget, balancing the budget, getting the deficit down, being really concerned, getting interest rates back to zero. Are you crazy? Interest rates should be higher. Getting interest rates back, they've been zero for 20 years to fuel more speculation, a bigger bubble in AI and these tech companies. What? Like, that's not what it was ever supposed to be about. No mention of a wall, barely any talk about crime. I mean, what happened to law and order? It's just interest rate, getting the free money again, because who does that benefit? Asset holders and billionaires, getting them their free money that they can borrow, cutting their taxes, cutting their expenses, and again, replacing a small section of the illegal immigrants with cheap, high-skilled labor from India or something. And at the same time, it's not even funny. Like, it'd be one thing if Trump still had energy and he was still big and forceful, but you see him, he's in a lot of ways sort of a diminished figure. And you know, he still has that fight in him. Like, you're never going to see him totally crash out. But this is, compared to the RNC in 2016, compared to some of the speeches he gave at the start, you know, it doesn't really even get you going. So I just don't know what people are all excited about. The policies aren't there. The delivery really is getting tough to watch. But everybody loves it. Everybody's happy with what they're getting. I mean, they just fill up the trough. They fill it up with slop. And people go nuts. And all they have to do, if you ever start to doubt whether what you're getting is really as good as people are saying it is, they just show you the Democrats, because that's how they've conditioned you. If you ever have the nerve to say, yeah, I don't know if I'm in love with what the Republicans are doing, all they have to do is show you the Democrats, and you're conditioned to say, oh, I hate that. Yeah, this is great by comparison. So I don't like Vance. I don't like Johnson. The speech was boring. It's the stuff that he says now, it's just getting kind of like weird, and this weird, like, have you ever, Canada and Mexico, have you ever heard of that? What the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? Canada and Mexico, ever heard of them? Butler, Pennsylvania, ever heard of it? Like, no one's ever heard of before. Like, what are you talking about? Can we be normal? I almost sit, but when the Democrats say this isn't normal, and I see this, and then Elon, it's like, yeah, it kind of isn't normal. In some ways, Biden was more normal. When you watched a Biden State of the Union, it was almost a little bit more normal, and he had his problems, obviously. So it's a little dispiriting, but anyway, so that's the first State of the Union. We're going to take a look at our super chats, and then I'm going to get out of here because it's been a late night, and I'm exhausted, like mentally exhausted from watching all that. We don't even need to go over all the different policies because it's everything we've already heard before. All the greatest hits. Doge tax cuts, Lake and Riley, the swimmer. Who's the swimmer? My mom texted me during it. I said, who is that? My mom said, that's the swimmer, Riley Gaines. Lake and Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines, the transgender that woke is dead. We're cutting everyone's taxes. Wasteful spending, Social Security's paying people at 300 years old. We sort of have heard all this before. We've heard it all before. None of it is terribly exciting. The few things I thought were good, here's what I thought was good. And I started to say this, and then Trump came in. Here's the good stuff. That's the bad. Here's the good. The way that Trump called out the Democrats, I thought was very smart in the beginning when he said, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, they're never going to clap for me. And it showed them. And I thought that was brilliant framing because it just made them look like assholes to set them up like that, to say, no matter what I say, they're going to boo me. And that's because they're so political, and it shows them, and they look miserable and angry. They got their stupid little signs. I thought that was very smart. And then to say, I hope maybe they'll just join up with America and be part of the solution. Thought that was a little weak, but maybe rhetorically smart. So that was okay. It's good that he closed the border. And it's like I said at the beginning of the stream, the one thing you got to give Trump credit for is that he did close the border. 8,000 apprehensions in the month of February, which is unbelievable. They went from 160,000 in May 2019 up to 350,000 under Biden at the peak in like 2023, 2022. down to 8,000 in 1 month. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievably good. So that's awesome. And then aside from that, the stuff on Ukraine is great. Pushing Zelensky to come to the table to make a deal, I think that was excellent. Aside from that, not too enthusiastic about the rest of the speech. I feel like there was one other thing I was trying to remember, but I don't think there was even one other thing that was that great. And it's interesting, of course, that Ben Shapiro was there. How about that? Ben Shapiro, after all this time, the original Never Trumper. Remember, Ben Shapiro did not vote for Trump in 2016. Ben Shapiro was a Never Trumper and a harsh critic. He would go on his show and talk about good Trump, bad Trump. And now he's an honored guest with his lapdog, Matt Walsh. And by the way, I don't care how based Matt Walsh is. As long as he works for Ben Shapiro, he's a bitch. And he seems like a nice guy. He seems like, honestly, he wants to be on our side. Matt Walsh obviously is spiritually with the Groypers. He wants to be on our side. He's a Catholic. He is a monarchist. He's pro-white. And he is a little bit critical of Israel. So clearly, spiritually, maybe somewhere deep down, he's with us. And I give him credit. He's come a long way. Years ago, he was making excuses for Ahmaud Arbery. Remember that? Remember Ahmaud Arbery? He was a month before George Floyd. He got killed by a cop when he was on a construction site with his Timberlands, and everybody called him a jogger. Remember, he was out there jogging through a active construction site in his Timberland boots, miles from where he lived. And Matt Walsh said in 2020, oh, I go to construction sites all the time. It's what guys do. That's just a guy thing. Yeah, because blacks are really into that sort of thing. Because blacks are really going and checking out construction sites and their Timberlands when they're out on a jog. Because they're really into work. They're really into working like that, right? If you want to say white guys like to do that, if you want to say Italian guys like to do that, Polish guys, you want to say Mexican guys like to do that, I agree. Oh, but a black guy in his Timberlands in a neighborhood where there's a string of armed robberies, and Matt Walsh said, oh, he's probably just jogging and taking a... So, to his credit, Matt Walsh has come a long way. Hasn't given anybody else credit. Doesn't want to throw a bone to the Groypers. We were on it from the beginning. But he's finally come to our side. Took him a long time, but you got to give him credit. He's finally showed up. With that being said, we can't consider him to be anything other than Ben Shapiro's bitch when he's showing up alongside him at the State of the Union. And you want to know why? Because if Candace Owens could do it, then you can do it. If Candace Owens, a black woman, if a black woman has more balls to stand up to Ben Shapiro and go it alone and start her own YouTube channel, if Candace Owens, a black woman, a black female who just had a second kid or second or third kid, if Candace Owens, who's pregnant, if she has more balls to stand up to Shapiro and flame out at Daily Wire and burn them severely and go and get millions of views on her own channel, then so can pussy Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles. If she can do it, if Brett Cooper could do it, Brett Cooper's like this big and she's a little white girl. If she could do it and Candace could do it with a child, then Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, the Catholic-based chads, they could do it too. They don't have to be holding Ben Shapiro's hand at the State of the Union. Come on, Matt Walsh. He's probably got one of those child leashes on. You know how parents will put a leash on their kids when they take them to the mall? I wonder if Ben Shapiro's holding that just underneath the barrier, if he's just got that, just so Matt Walsh doesn't go and talk to Thomas Massie. In case Matt Walsh tries to leave Ben Shapiro's side and maybe talk a little bit with Thomas Massie, or maybe talk a little bit with somebody anti-Semitic. That way Ben Shapiro could just, jerking back a little bit. So, and I'm just saying, it's nothing personal. When Matt Walsh is ready to do the right thing, I will respect him a lot more, and I would even be willing to be friendly with him. I think he has so much potential, but not until he ditches Shapiro. That's just embarrassing. You should be embarrassed, especially because Shapiro is synonymous with out-of-touch, Israel, Jew-loving, neocon fucking bullshit. How could you... It'd be one thing if you're working at Blaze. At least Glenn Beck is likable. Glenn Beck, I actually kind of like him in spite of he's a super Zionist. And you can work at Fox News. They're obviously super controlled. But you're with Ben Shapiro. He's like synonymous with little privileged Jew lover, Israel loving traitor. And you're standing there like an accessory. You're standing there with your beard, with your manicured beard that he paid for as an accessory to Shapiro. It's a bad look. It's a bad look, Matt. And I don't judge. Well, I do judge. I don't know what his personal situation is. Maybe he needs the money. Maybe he needs the Jewish money to pay him. And he's got a family. So there's that. All these wife guys, they want to be so tough, but they need their money. They need their stable income. But we can't take him seriously until he leaves Shapiro. At this point, it's just embarrassing. We almost need to start a campaign to get Walsh and Knowles to leave Daily Wire. Candace left. Brett Cooper left. Daily Wire is in flames. They're done. They're cooked. They get no views. The only thing that's keeping them afloat is Walsh and Knowles. If Walsh and Knowles stood up, then their game is over. You know that meme? If we stood up, then their little game is over. It's literally if Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles just stood up, Ben Shapiro and Andrew Klavan and Jeremy Boring, that cocksucker, their game is over. So I think that it's time for Walsh and Knowles to be brave and do the right thing. Their base will support them. Their audience will support them. I cleared the way. Candace Owens cleared the way. Tucker Carlson has done some good in that direction. Now it's time for Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles to really deliver it, and it'll be a different country. So our fate, really, it's in their hands. These Shabbos goys, we need the white men to wake up. I can't be the only white man doing any heavy lifting. They say I'm not white. Let's see the other white guys do some lifting as well, right? Let's see Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles do something courageous. Anyway, so that was really, it was really interesting to see them up there. I wonder if we could find a frame of it because they showed it so briefly. I think they showed it at the very beginning. Let me see if we could find it. But the picture's worth 1,000 words to see Matt posted up like that right next to him. Anyway, well, we'll see if we can find it. But all right, so that's that. I want to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all that. That's my hot take on the guests, the honored guests. I would give that joint address like a 4 out of 10. That was like maybe a 5 out of 10. Extremely average. It wasn't compelling. It wasn't uplifting. There wasn't one memorable moment where I said, wow, I really like that line. Wow, that was really... I never felt it. A lot of it just didn't land. So, I don't know. Maybe you disagree, but I thought it was exceedingly average. And I don't like the direction they're going in.